The meatbag's gambit, the observation deck of Fort Crucible hummed with alien voices, their translation matrices creating a cacophony of languages that never quite sensed. Through the reinforced transparisteel, the gas giant Korthax churned beneath. Them in violent orange spirals, its storms capable of tearing apart starships. The military academy orbiting above was equally unforgiving. Marcus Kane stood at attention in the staging area, his human physique dwarfed by the towering Vextai warriors beside him. At 19, he was the youngest cadet in his cohort, earning him the nickname Meatbag from his alien peers. The insult stung less now than it had 6 months ago when he first arrived from Earth's outer colonies. The Crucible Gauntlet, announced Drill Commander Varnak, his 4 arms gesturing toward the massive chamber beyond the blast doors. The Jasha scarred exoskeleton gleamed under the harsh lights. 147 attempts in the last decade. 0 completions under 10 hours. Most cadets emerge broken, if they emerge at all. The other cadets, a mix of reptilian Sectar, crystalline Nexari, and hulking Gorvani, shifted nervously. Marcus remained still, studying the chambers visible. Entry points and energy conduits. His father had been a combat engineer, his mother a xenorchaeologist. Both had taught him to observe before acting. Neural collapse is common, Varnak continued, his mandibles clicking with what passed for amusement among his species. The simulation adapts to exploit psychological weaknesses. It learns your fears, then feeds them back amplified. A Sectar. Cadet named Crix hissed softly. What manner of AI could be so sophisticated? Varnak's 4 eyes fixed on the reptilian warrior, the kind that was designed by races far older than any of us. This facility was built atop pre-existing structures. We simply inherited the technology. Marcus's hand twitched toward his datapad, then stopped. Something in Varnak's tone suggested more than inheritance. It suggested ignorance. The Zraki didn't fully understand what they built their academy on. I volunteer, Marcus said, his voice cutting through the alien chatter. The chamber fell silent. Varnak's mandibles spread in what humans had learned to recognize as laughter. The meatbag wishes to be first? How predictable. Very well, human. Show us how your species handles true warfare. As the blast doors began to iris open, Marcus caught something in the commander's expression, not just amusement, but curiosity. And beneath that, barely perceptible, even to his trained eye, was something that looked almost like ... anticipation. The gauntlet awaited, and with it, answers to questions Marcus was only beginning to formulate. Into the crucible the moment Marcus stepped into the gauntlet chamber, reality shifted. The sterile metal walls dissolved into a war-torn landscape under an alien sun. Purple grass crunched beneath his boots as atmospheric processors hummed overhead, struggling to maintain breathable air. The scent of ozone and decay filled his nostrils. In the observation deck above, Commander Varnak leaned forward, his secondary, arms working the control interface. Beginning Phase 1. Environmental adaptation and basic survival protocols. Beside him, Lieutenant Zepha Nexari, whose crystalline form refracted the control room's light into prismatic patterns monitored. Marcus's biometrics. Heart rate elevated but stable. Adrenaline within normal parameters for his species. Marcus moved cautiously through the simulated battlefield, his eyes scanning for threats. The terrain was deliberately disorienting, a maze of crashed spacecraft, crystalline formations that could be cover or traps, and pools of luminescent liquid that might be water or acid. Every human instinct screamed danger, but his training kicked in. A movement to his left. Marcus dove behind a twisted piece of hull plating as energy bolts seared the air where he'd been standing. 3 spider-like constructs emerged from camouflaged positions their plasma cannons already charging for another volley. Impressive reflexes, Zeph noted, his harmonious voice tinkling like wind chimes. Most cadets freeze during first contact. Marcus didn't freeze. He analyzed. The constructs moved in a predictable pattern: advance, fire, reload. Their sensors swept in overlapping arcs, but there was a gap. Always a gap. His father's voice echoed in his memory. Every system has vulnerabilities, son. You just have to find the right perspective. Rolling left, Marcus sprinted toward a cluster of crystal formations. The constructs tracked him, but their programming assumed standard alien movement patterns: cautious, tactical, predictable. Marcus ran like his life depended on it, because in this simulation, it did. He reached the crystals as plasma fire scorched the ground behind him. But instead of taking cover, he leaped onto the nearest formation and began climbing. The crystalline surface was slick, designed to be impassable. Marcus's human hands, evolved for grasping and manipulation, found purchase where alien claws or tentacles would slip. What is he doing? Varnick's voice carried a note of confusion. From his elevated position, Marcus could see the constructs. Vulnerable back sensors. He pulled a training knife from his belt, standard issue, designed for emergencies. In one fluid motion, he hurled it at the nearest construct's power coupling. A weak point visible only from above. The blade struck true. The construct sparked and collapsed. The remaining two turned to face this unexpected threat, exposing themselves to Marcus's position. He dropped down behind them, using their own bulk as cover, and systematically disabled their mobility systems with precise strikes to their joint assemblies. 15 minutes into the simulation, Phase 1 was complete. Impossible, Varnick whispered. All 4 eyes locked on his display. The fastest completion time for Phase 1 was 37 minutes. The system awakens as Marcus caught his breath among the deactivated constructs. The environment began to shift again. But this time, something was different. The transition wasn't smooth, stuttered, glitched, as if the simulation was struggling. With itself in the control room, alarms began chirping. Zeph's crystalline form dimmed with concern. Commander, we're detecting anomalous activity in the deep systems. The simulation parameters are changing. Varnick's mandibles clicked rapidly. Changing how? We're barely into Phase 2. The AI appears to be rewriting itself in real time. Combat difficulty is scaling beyond programmed parameters. Zeph's harmonic voice carried an edge of fear. The system is accessing subsections we didn't even know existed. Below, Marcus found himself facing a new environment, a space station corridor filled with zero gravity and hostile atmosphere. But the enemies emerging from hidden compartments weren't the typical training constructs. These were sleeker, more intelligent, moving with purpose that suggested genuine tactical thinking rather than simple programming. Marcus pushed off from a bulkhead, using his human adaptability to navigate the 3-dimensional battlefield. Where other species might struggle with disorientation, humans had evolved from tree-dwelling ancestors. His spatial awareness, honed by millennia of climbing and swinging through complex environments, served him well. The first enemy, a floating orb bristling with energy weapons, fired a spread of coherent light beams. Marcus twisted, using a damaged ventilation shaft as both cover and leverage point. He kicked off hard, launching himself toward the orb while drawing his sidearm. But as he fired, the orb didn't just evade, it learned. Its movement pattern adapted to his firing solution, predicting his next shot with uncanny accuracy. This wasn't simulation behavior. This was something else entirely. Commander, Zeph's voice was barely above a whisper. The system just accessed our personnel files. It's reading Marcus's psychological profile, his training records, even his genetic markers. Varnick felt ice form in his circulatory system. That's impossible. Those files are classified beyond the simulation's clearance level. On the main display, Marcus continued his deadly dance through the zero-gravity environment. But now the enemies weren't just adapting to his movements. They were anticipating them with precision that bordered on prescience. Yet somehow, the human was staying ahead of them. Marcus seemed to sense the shift in the simulation's behavior. Instead of fighting predictably, he began incorporating random elements movements that defied tactical logic, shots that served no apparent purpose, maneuvers that violated standard combat doctrine. It was chaos, but chaos with intention. A voice crackled through the control room speakers, not through their communication system, but through the facility's own infrastructure. The words were in a language that predated every known civilization in the galaxy, yet somehow their translation matrices rendered it comprehensible. Subject demonstrates required unpredictability parameters. Advancing to Protocol 7, Varnic's forearms trembled. Protocol 7 doesn't exist. We only programmed 6 phases. Zeph's crystalline form was now pulsing with rapid light patterns, the Nexarray equivalent of panic. Commander, something else is in control now. Ancient recognition. The simulation environment dissolved entirely, replacing the space station with something that had never been in any training program. Marcus found himself standing in a vast chamber lined with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. The walls pulsed with energy that felt older than the stars themselves. Where am I? Marcus spoke aloud, his voice echoing strangely in the impossible space. In the control room, panic had given way to horrified fascination. Banks of instruments that had been dormant for decades suddenly blazed to life, displaying readouts in scripts no living being could translate. Varnic watched his carefully controlled simulation spiral into something beyond his comprehension. The deep systems are fully active now, Zeph reported, his voice tight with controlled terror. Power consumption is at 300% of normal parameters. These aren't our computers anymore. Something else is using our hardware as an interface. Down in the chamber, Marcus was discovering that his human adaptability served him in ways his instructors had never imagined. The geometric patterns weren't just decoration, they were tests. Puzzles that required thinking in dimensions his mind wasn't designed for, yet somehow managed anyway. Where alien logic might seek perfect mathematical solutions, human intuition found unexpected shortcuts. Each solved pattern revealed new sections of the chamber, new challenges that seemed designed not to defeat him, but to measure him. Marcus began to understand that he wasn't fighting for survival anymore. He was being evaluated by something that had been waiting a very long time. The ancient voice spoke again, this time directly into Marcus's mind. Previous candidates showed promise, but lacked sufficient irregularity, rigid thinking, predictable responses. You demonstrate the chaos pattern we require. What candidates? Marcus asked, his breath forming strange vapors in the alien atmosphere. Images flashed through, his consciousness memories that weren't his own. Proud warriors from a dozen species attempting these same challenges over millennia, all failing at the same point where they encountered problems that couldn't be solved through conventional means, where they needed to think like something that shouldn't exist. We are the Kethmoran, the voice continued. We guided 12 civilizations to greatness before the Great Silence claimed us. Our final protocols searched for a species capable of unconventional solutions, chaos within order, madness within reason. Marcus understood now why he was succeeding where others had failed. Human beings were the galaxy's great anomaly, species that had evolved not through specialization, but through adaptability. They were generalists in a universe of specialists, capable of thinking in ways that violated every other species' logical frameworks. The gauntlet was never a training program, he realized aloud. Correct, it was a filter, a test designed to identify when the next candidate species had achieved sufficient development. The ancient AI's presence felt vast and patient. Your people show the required characteristics: unpredictability, resourcefulness, the ability to succeed through methods that should not work. Above in the control room, Varnick watched displays that showed energy signatures older than his species' entire recorded history. "How long?" he whispered. "How long has this been waiting here?" The answer came not from his instruments, but from the chamber itself, broadcast on frequencies that bypassed their communication systems entirely. 17,431 years since the last candidate species achieved qualification status.